Welcome in to the Bean Counter podcast, everybody. I am your host, Beanie, as you all know. And today I have a very exciting new idea that I plan on doing every Thursday on this channel. And that is called Top 10 Thursday, where I just go through all the sports and I give you various top 10 lists. Most of the time it's just going to be like the power rankings of certain leagues. But every now and then it's going to be like top 10 players, top 10 free agents, top 10 trade opportunities, things like that. I plan on doing this every single Thursday. I think it's a good idea. You guys know me. I love top 10 lists. I love rankings. I love grading things. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. So yeah, but before we get into that, just a few housekeeping things. First of all, I did qualify for the Fall Cup in MLB The Show. I will be playing on Saturday for that $4,000 prize. I'm the 52 seed in the tournament, I believe. I think there were 3 other people that tied with me, so I don't know how they're going to work that out. But I will be streaming that on Saturday. Did I say Friday? I meant Saturday. So come around the channel for that. It should be really, really exciting. Hopefully I don't get knocked out in the first round, even though that is a distinct possibility. I'd really love to cash, because it would just be really cool to cash in the first ever MLB The Show tournament, esport tournament. I just think it would be awesome. Also, submit questions into the comments. I plan on, in the future of this show or podcast or whatever, I plan on, at the end of every episode, kind of answering some questions that you guys may have. So if you guys have any questions for me about anything at all, I will answer it. You can ask me. It doesn't have to be sports related. It can be politics. It can be TV shows that you like. Anything like that. I would love to hear from you guys. Get some questions in and add that to make a better show. Eventually, I'd like to get to the point to where maybe I could dedicate one day a week to just purely a Q&A show. I think that would be a really good idea. But you guys let me know what you guys want in the comments. And like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know. Also, the last thing before we get into the top 10 list, please, I'm begging you guys, please share this podcast on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, but if you guys want to link it over to Facebook and have your friends watch it, that would be great. If every single person that watched this podcast got a friend to watch it as well, to become a fan, to subscribe to the channel, that would be amazing. Also, leave a like, and like I said before, comment. It really does help the algorithm, and it helps me get into people's searches and their recommendeds, so it really does help the channel out more than you know. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into the first top 10 list. We're going to start with the top 10 MLB free agents for this offseason. I'm very excited about this MLB offseason, even though my team, the Braves, I think that we're going to have a very tricky offseason to navigate, because we don't have as much money as we had last year, but we still have enough money to put together an effective team. I don't know. It's going to be tricky how it all works out. There aren't that many obvious fits for us, even though there are a couple. But anyways, let's get into it with some guys that just missed the cut for the top 10, and that is Madison Bumgarner, Cole Hamels, Jake Odorizzi, Will Smith, Jose Abreu, and Kyle Gibson. A lot of pitching in that just missed. I'm not very high on that second tier of pitching in this free agent class. It just seems like a lot of guys, kind of like that Nathan Eovaldi, who are going to end up getting overpaid. And the guy that I'm the absolute lowest on is Madison Bumgarner. And it kind of worries me that the Braves are linked to him, because Madison Bumgarner is one of these guys who is... his name is worth more than his actual production. And he's going to get paid a lot of money just based off that name. But if you look at his metrics, he really hasn't been that great since 2015, maybe 2016. I know he's been hurt a lot, and that's not something that you really expect with him moving forward. They were kind of fluky injuries, but even taking away those injuries, he hasn't been that good. He's had a 315 to 325 xWOBA for the past like 3 to 4 years, that's not very good. That's the kind of ex-Woba that you would expect from a number 4 or a number 5, not what you would expect from a guy that's going to be getting like number 2 money, maybe even number 1 money. Who knows? It depends on which team signs him. I hope it's not the Braves. So I think I'm going to get a lot of questions on why I didn't have Madison Bumgarner in my top 10 free agents, and that's the reason why is I just really don't believe in him that much moving forward. Okay, but moving on to the top 10. At number 10, we have Mike Moustakas. Mike Moustakas has been a criminally underpaid and undervalued player, really for the past 3 years. He ended up getting a qualifying offer from the Kansas City Royals. He rejected it. He signed a contract for less value. Then he moves on to the Milwaukee Brewers. He gets another contract for less than his qualifying offer. In fact, I think that if you combine those two contracts together, they still don't add up to what that qualifying offer would have been in just that 1 year. So we ended up really getting screwed because of that. But I think that this is going to be the first time where he's not going to make what he has been worth, because he's just older, and he's not going to be as good moving forward, because that's what happens to older players. But I still think that he's going to get a good contract in the 2 to 3 year range, worth $25 to $35 million, which is a pretty small bump. It could go up to 40, maybe 45 million if the market really kind of develops around him. The problem for him is that there are two better third basemen ahead of him, and that's Josh Donaldson and Anthony Rendon, and they're going to get the big money, and he's kind of in that second tier. But I expect him, there are a lot of teams that could use his services. The Dodgers, the Phillies, a bunch of teams, the Rangers even are kind of looking for a third baseman, but they seem to be more focused on Josh Donaldson. But I expect Mike Moustakas to sign with the Braves. I kind of expect it relatively early on. He could get retained by the Brewers as well, or possibly the Reds. But right now I'm thinking the Braves, because I don't think the Braves are going to be able to keep Josh Donaldson, and I don't think that they're going to want to roll with Austin Riley. So I expect them to address third base through either through trade or through Mike Moustakas. At number 9, I have Didi Gregorius. He had a bad year last year. It was injury riddled. He had a terrible September. It was just a very odd year for Didi Gregorius. But I think that teams aren't going to look at that and say, oh no, Didi is done. I think they're going to look at that and say, hey, we have an opportunity here to get a very valuable player for less than his market value, because I could see Didi Gregorius taking kind of like a Josh Donaldson contract, where it's short term, 1 to 2 years, for maybe a slightly higher AAV than he would get for a longer term contract, and trying to rebuild his value. And I think some team is going to really end up benefiting from that. And right now I have that team as the Phillies. Could be a variety of different teams, but I think the Phillies right now would make a lot of sense for him. And that would really make that lineup pretty intimidating if they got a healthy and right Didi Gregorius in there. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope he goes somewhere else. But that's my guess right now. At number 8, I have Hyun-Jin Ryu. I'm not as high on Hyun-Jin Ryu as a lot of people are. A lot of people seem to be thinking that they could get, a Cy Young caliber pitcher in 2020 out of Ryu. I think you're going to be getting more of like a solid 2 or maybe a solid 3 out of him. I think that this past year was a bit of an aberration, not a total aberration, but I mean, he's not going to, for 5 months of the season, he's not going to be putting up an ERA in the low to mid ones. That's just not going to happen again, I don't think. I mean, he'd have to get pretty lucky for that. But he's still a very good pitcher. He is a bit older, so he's not going to be getting an insanely massive contract, but it is going to be a pretty healthy payday for him. And right now I have him going back to the Dodgers, because outside of Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler, the Dodgers really don't. Their rotation, in my opinion, is the biggest question mark on that team. I don't think that they have anyone beyond those guys that you can just lock in surefire. They have some interesting prospects that could come in. Urias could come in and maybe take up a rotation spot. Maybe they go out and get another starting pitcher alongside. But I think Ryu going back to the Dodgers makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. It's possible that another team comes in and outbids them, but the Dodgers have just a shit ton of money, so it is what it is. I see him going back to the Dodgers, and yeah, let's move on. Marcell Ozuna. This one is really interesting because there are a lot of teams that are in need of outfield help and in need of a right-handed power bat. The Braves are one of them. I would love for the Braves to bring in Marcell Ozuna, but the Braves have other priorities outside of a right-handed outfielder, and they also have Nick Markakis eating up one of those spots, and Marcell Ozuna isn't going to platoon with anyone. He's too good for that. So I think you can comfortably rule out the Braves for Marcell Ozuna. But there are a lot of other teams, and right now I think the Reds are probably the favorites to sign him. The Reds are looking to compete this year. I think they're going to be very aggressive on the free agent market when it comes to finding bats and pitching. I think that they could be in play for every single player that's outside of that top tier Anthony Rendon and Garrett Cole tier. So, yeah, they're going to be very aggressive this offseason, and I think that is one of the players that they're going to go after the most this offseason. So, after him, we have Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler is probably my favorite bargain buy this offseason. And what I mean by bargain, I don't mean that he's going to not get paid. I mean, he is going to get paid. I'm thinking a contract in the range of $70 to $90 million, somewhere in there for about 4 years, maybe a fifth-year option or something like that. He's not as young as most people think he is, or even I thought he was. I mean, he is 29. He'll be 30 next year. So that is a bit older for a pitcher. But the thing about Zach Wheeler is that he has always underperformed his metrics. And I think that in a lot of ways he could end up being kind of Garrett Cole-like, because Garrett Cole, when he was with Pittsburgh, everyone always said that, his metrics are amazing, but it just never adds up to elite production. It's just always good production, not phenomenal production. And then what happens? He moves on to an elite roster, and the rest is history. He becomes one of the best pitchers in baseball. I think that could happen with Zach Wheeler as well. And the enticing thing about that is that you could end up grabbing a guy that is one of the best pitchers in baseball and pay him like a good number 3. Because $70 to $80 million over 4 years, if you're an ace, you get way more than that. And I think Zach Wheeler does have that upside. He does come with some risk. He does have an extensive injury history. He hasn't performed at the level that his metrics suggest that he will. So there is a lot of risk in signing him. But the upside is just tremendous. Right now I have him going to the Phillies, and I really hope I'm wrong about that, because I think that it would be potentially the best signing of the offseason for whoever gets him. Then I have Josh Donaldson, and Josh Donaldson I've been following very closely because I'm a Braves fan, and I hope that we bring him back, but I'm starting to get more and more skeptical of that as the days go by. Right now, it looks like the Dodgers have interest. It looks like a few of the other teams in the NL East have interest, but the team that's most aggressively pursuing him is the Texas Rangers. And right now, I see them getting the nod over all the other teams that I just mentioned. And I see him getting a contract in the range of 3 years for about $75 million, potentially a fourth-year option worth about $20 million. Something in that range right there. But the Rangers, for whatever reason, they think that they are right on the forefront of competing, and getting a guy like Josh Donaldson would definitely help them in that venture. I'm a little bit skeptical of that idea that the Rangers, I think they're a little further away than they think they are. But yeah, they're going to be aggressive as well, and they're really going to go after it. Number 4, I have Yasmani Grandal. In my opinion, the most criminally underrated player in all of baseball. Yasmani Grandal is, for several years now, he has been amongst the best hitting catchers in baseball and the best defensive catchers in baseball. Now, I know a lot of people will push back on both of those ideas because he's only a good like thrower of the ball or blocker. In the playoffs a couple years ago, he was terrible. The thing that makes Yasmani Grandal so enticing and gives him so much hidden value that you don't see is pitch framing. He is the best pitch framer in baseball. Tyler Flowers was kind of competing with him for a while, and there are a few others that are really good pitch framers as well. But Yasmani Grandal is an elite pitch framer. He can save you up to 20 runs per year based off just his pitch framing. And that can add up to 2 wins per year because the general model is for every 10 runs above average, you generate 1 win for your team. So, yeah, I mean, that alone is worth 2 wins. When you add on top of that the power that he brings and the fact that he's a switch hitter and a competent switch hitter, he gets on base. He is an extremely valuable player that, in my opinion, has been criminally underrated because the WAR models, it took them a while to catch up with the fact that he was such a good pitch framer. Fangraphs just incorporated pitch framing into their metrics, so a lot of the time you don't see that value in Yasmani, but I think you're going to start seeing it more and more. He is a bit older, so there is some risk. There is some risk of decline there, especially for a catcher. But right now, I see the Braves getting him. If the Braves miss out on Donaldson, I think Alex Anthopoulos is going to want to add one massive bat or one massive position player to this roster. And I think catcher is the most obvious way to do it. And unfortunately, Yasmani Grandal is really the only one that's on the free agent market. Contreras from the Cubs is a trade possibility, but I don't really see that happening either. So right now, Yasmani, I think, is the ideal target for the Braves. Mike Moustakas, I don't know if they'd be able to fit both of them into their budget, so it could possibly be one or the other, and if it's one or the other, I'm going with Yasmani, just because I think that he's way better than Mike Moustakas. So we'll have to see what happens, but right now I have both of them going to the Braves, but I don't know how realistic that is from a financial standpoint. It's going to be a matter of what they end up signing for. And then top 3. Okay, I think the top 3 were pretty set in stone from the beginning. At number 3, we have Steven Strasburg, and I see Steven Strasburg leaving the Nationals. I think the Nationals are really going to have to pick between Anthony Rendon and Strasburg. I don't know if they can keep both of them. Long term, I don't know how viable that is. I know that Washington wants a long-term competitor, and I don't know if it's the smartest idea to put that many eggs into one basket, or into basically 2 baskets. With Anthony Rendon and Steven Strasburg. They could do it. They have the financial wherewithal to do it. I just don't know how wise it would be, especially given Strasburg's injury concerns, his age, the likelihood of decline in a few seasons. I just don't see it. I think the Nationals are a smarter team than that, and I think that they end up going with Rendon over Strasburg. And so Strasburg has to go somewhere else. Well, the obvious fit is the San Diego Padres. He is from San Diego. He went to college in San Diego. That's the obvious fit. The Padres are looking to compete. They signed Machado last offseason. They're looking to go for it. I don't know how wise that is, but they have a lot of really young and really exciting talent. And adding Strasburg to that rotation with all the pitching prospects that they have coming up, it could be very, very scary for other teams. So, yeah, Strasburg to the Padres, to me, that's one of those situations where it almost makes too much sense not to happen. Then finally, the highest pitcher, Garrett Cole. I think a lot of people might push back on this, might say that Garrett Cole deserves to be number 1 on this list just because he's so elite. I don't view it that way. He is elite. He is fantastic, but he's also a 30-year-old pitcher. And 30-year-old pitchers, that's right at the outset where you really start to decline. You start to see declines in velo. Now, I know there are exceptions. You have Justin Verlander, you have Max Scherzer, you have guys like that. But generally, it's a pretty steady decline after the age of 31 or 32. In all metrics, not just velocity or whatever. It's in your FIP, in your ERA, in your spin rate, and anything that you can imagine, you decline. But Garrett Cole is still going to get paid, and he's still probably going to be the best pitcher to come out of this offseason, at least for the next 3 to 4 years. And I see him going to the Yankees. The Yankees really need pitching help. And it's possible that the Yankees look to check down and not commit that many years and that much money to a 30-year-old pitcher, and they check down to a guy like Zach Wheeler for a little bit cheaper, or maybe Strasburg, even though I don't really see that. Maybe Ryu. Maybe even lower than that, they go with like a Cole Hamels for a short-term option, or Jake Odorizzi or someone like that. But right now I see the Yankees really going for it. That their window is now. Garrett Cole fits their window perfectly. So yeah, I see them spending big money and Garrett Cole being a Yankee. And then the number one free agent of the offseason, Anthony Rendon. He is so special, and he is so underrated, and he's ridiculous. He is one of the 5 best players in baseball right now. He's so consistent. Third base is an extremely strong position. It's crazy to think that he just made his first All-Star game. He's been putting up 7 wins for 3 to 4 years now. He's been incredible. But you also have Nolan Arenado and Chris Bryant. So that's the reason why he never made an All-Star game. Manny Machado. I mean, you have a ton of great third basemen. And but I think he's probably the best one. I really do. Right now, if I had to take one third baseman for one season, I'm taking Anthony Rendon. Over Nolan Arenado, pretty close, but I'd take Rendon. Over Chris Bryant, I'm taking Rendon. Over Matt Chapman, I'm taking Rendon, I think. Lots of great third basemen, but Rendon, I think, is the best. And I think the Nats are going to keep him. Like I said, I think the Nats are going to likely have to choose between Strasburg and Rendon, and I don't even think it's a question that you go with Rendon. The Nats, even if they lose Strasburg, their pitching is still going to be very, very, very strong. And they can check down to a second-tier pitching option that isn't going to be as expensive as Strasburg to fill that hole and still end up having one of the 5 best rotations in baseball. If you lose Anthony Rendon, your window is going to start closing very, very quickly. I think he's that valuable. But okay, that's the MLB free agents. Let's move on to some NFL power rankings. Top 10 NFL teams right now. But before we do that, a little bit of news in the NFL. Colin Kaepernick has a tryout for just a general tryout that NFL teams can attend if they want to. I wasn't a supporter of Colin Kaepernick whenever he kneeled. But I was one of those people who said, let him do what he wants. Who cares if he's kneeling for the national anthem? I don't care. I don't agree with his goals for it. I think that he's statistically misguided. I think that he infers things that aren't happening. And I think that he says some really silly and stupid things about, Che Guevara, wearing the Che Guevara shirt and saying things about Cuba and communism and shit that I think is just ignorant. I really do. I don't like Colin Kaepernick. I think that he's kind of an asshole. And I think that a lot of what he did was just marketing himself. It cost him some, but he gained a lot from this. I mean, book deals and sponsorships. He got a lot. He's a richer man than he likely otherwise would have been. But I'm not a huge fan of Colin Kaepernick, and I'm kind of ready for this story to die. So I am begging NFL teams, please sign Colin Kaepernick and let him be a backup quarterback somewhere. Let him ride on the bench somewhere, please. Because the only reason that Colin Kaepernick has value right now, the only reason to political value, let's say, is because he's a martyr. He's a martyr, right? He made a political stand, and the NFL threw him out because of that political stand, which that's one way to view it. But that's the perception of many people. My opinion is that he was a solid enough quarterback, but he was not good enough to cause that much controversy and survive it. His career was not strong enough to do that. Clay Travis said this in one of his recent shows. He said that if Aaron Rodgers came out and supported polygamy, Aaron Rodgers would still be the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. It would not matter. And that's true. If Colin Kaepernick had been Aaron Rodgers or been Russell Wilson or whoever, it would not matter what he said. It wouldn't matter at all. He could advocate for Mao Zedong style communism, he could advocate for death camps, and he would still be the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. But he wasn't that good. He was just okay. He was just an okay middle of the road quarterback, and for okay middle of the road quarterbacks, you cannot be that controversial and that persistent in your controversy. You just can't do it. But so he had to make a decision. Does this matter more, or does my politics matter more? And his politics mattered more. And now he's going to get a chance to go back into the NFL. The NFL has said, okay, we'll give you a tryout. And I'm just begging any team just to stop this nonsense surrounding Colin Kaepernick. Just sign him. Just sign him. Let him be your third string quarterback. Whatever. I don't care. As soon as you sign him, we hear a few stories for the first couple weeks about Colin Kaepernick and, his whole thing. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Like, how's he being treated? We'll hear about that, and then it'll be over because he's not a martyr anymore. So NFL, sign Colin Kaepernick. But okay, NFL power rankings at the team that just missed, and I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback for this. The Kansas City Chiefs, they come in at number 11 in the top 10. They just missed. I don't believe in the Chiefs. I really don't. Patrick Mahomes is phenomenal. One of the best quarterbacks in the league. His future has, in my opinion, probably a lot of Super Bowls in front of it. It does. He has a lot of championships to play for and to potentially win. He does, but this team is massively flawed. They cannot stop the run to save their life. They have one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, and they can't run the ball either. This is just a massively flawed team. If they make it anywhere, it's going to be because Patrick Mahomes is an absolute god. That's the only way that they're going to make it anywhere, because the rest of this team is massively flawed. Massively flawed. At number 10, I have the Steelers. The Steelers have no business, none, being in the top 10 of any NFL power ranking. This team it does not look like a top 10 NFL team, but the Steelers are one of the smartest organizations in football. They figure it out. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I had a comment in an episode ago saying, will you talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick? Yes, I will. Minkah Fitzpatrick is insane. He has transformed this defense into something that they should not be. They should not be this good. This offense should not be this good. They're still not very good, the offense, but they're good enough. They're 5-4, and I think that they're one of the better 5-4 teams in football. They're really, really good. They're not going to win the division because the Ravens are much better. But right now, if the season ended today, they'd be a playoff team. And that's crazy to say with Mason Rudolph as your quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers would be a playoff team. I just think it's a testament to that organization and just how smart and how effective they navigate team building. They've lost Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, just massive, massive talent losses. They're still winning. They're still winning. And that's incredible to me. Number 9, I have the Texans. Houston Texans are, they go about things so quietly. You never hear anything about the Houston Texans. They're just so nondescript, but just steadily they're chugging along. Deshaun Watson, he's not, flamboyantly out there. Yeah, everybody knows how good Deshaun Watson is and how much potential he has even still and how much he's already realizing that potential. But they don't really jump out of the page at you, but they just steadily keep winning, and it's pretty exciting if you're a Texans fan, because they have a lot of upside. Maybe next year patch up the offensive line a little bit, add a few things on defense here or there. You could be a Super Bowl contender because your quarterback is set in stone. Now, I do worry a little bit about Deshaun Watson and injury. That is a concern because he is a mobile quarterback, and mobile quarterbacks can get hurt more often, but he does a good enough job of avoiding hard contact, avoiding awkward landings and things like that. Plus, he's not completely reliant on his legs. He can be a pocket passer. He's very good, and so are the Texans. At number 8, I have the Cowboys. After their loss to the Vikings, I thought about dropping them from the top 10, but I can't do it. This team still just has too much talent to be where they're at right now. They should be 6-3 at worst, 7-2 probably. They shouldn't have lost to the Jets. I don't think they should have lost this game to the Vikings. Dak Prescott was unbelievable against the Vikings. It's just Jason Garrett has got to go. This team could be so much better with Sean McVay. If they had Sean McVay as their head coach, this team would be 8-1 right now. But they don't. Jason Garrett is not a good coach. I've been very critical of him for years now, but now I'm actually able to say it. Jason Garrett's got to go. Jerry Jones, get it done. Because they might not make the playoffs. I still think they're one of the 10 best teams in football. I really do. Maybe even one of the 5 best teams in football from a talent perspective, but where they're at right now, they might not make the playoffs. Their schedule does not get much easier moving forward. Number 7, I have the Vikings. I'm still not a massive believer in the Vikings. I still question Kirk Cousins. The win over the Cowboys was impressive enough, and I have to give them credit. That's why I put them one spot above the Cowboys, but still I think they have a lot of question marks. But there are no question. Well, they really only have one question mark, and that's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, like 90% of his passing yards the other day were to his running back and his tight end. He doesn't get the ball to the wide receiver in that game hardly at all. I think he had like 50 passing yards, something like that, to wide receivers. It was nothing. So it was just, kind of dinking and dunking. It wasn't anything special. So I still consider him a massive, massive question mark. But they do have Dalvin Cook. They have a great defense. They have a lot of things to like, but still, with Kirk Cousins, I'm not sure how much long-term viability this team has. Number 6, I have the Packers. That might be a little low. I've never been the biggest Aaron Rodgers fan. I've always acknowledged that from a talent perspective, he is the elite of the elite, maybe the best of all time. But I still have serious questions about his leadership, about his intangibles, about the things that you can't measure. I know he's athletic. I know that he can make throws that no one else can make, but I don't know if he can lead a team the way that he's going to need to take this team to a Super Bowl, because I don't think that the roster around him is Super Bowl worthy. If they win the Super Bowl, it will be because of Aaron Rodgers and no one else. The team just has to be good enough to not drag him down, but he also has to lead the team to a good place. And that defense, earlier in the season, everyone was hyping up this defense. I've seen a lot of holes in this defense in the past 4 to 5 weeks. I really have. I'm not in love with it. So right now I have them at 6th. You could make an argument that they should be 4th, maybe 5th. I don't think 3rd would be reasonable. So yeah, I think 4 through 6 is kind of that they're all kind of in the same boat. So at number 5, I have the Seattle Seahawks, and I think that they're kind of right there with the Packers, but the thing about the Seahawks is I love the team around Russell Wilson a lot more than I love the team around Aaron Rodgers. I think that he has some explosive playmaker. Russell Wilson has some explosive playmakers. I really like the game plan. I love Pete Carroll. I love what he does. The defense is good. It's just a really solid team all around. The only problem with the Seahawks is that they're in the same division with the 49ers, so they're not likely to get like a bye week or anything like that, like the Packers potentially could. So that's a massive drawback to them, just the nature of the beast. But from a talent perspective, I think that they're a little bit better than the Packers right now. And then ahead of them, I have the Saints. Yes, the Saints lost to the Falcons at home. The Saints always have one game almost every year where they're at home, they're playing a team that they should just destroy, and they lose. And a lot of times that team is the Falcons. The Saints just do that weird thing every year. This was the game that they got it out of their system. I think that they probably lose maybe one more game the rest of the year, at the most two. I think the Saints are going to be one of the divisional. They'll be one of the two teams in the NFC to get the bye week. I think they're the second best team in the NFL right now, only second to the team that I'm about to mention, and that is number 3, the San Francisco 49ers. Nick Bosa is a monster. He has cooled off a little bit from his performance from a couple weeks ago, but he is still he is something else. That defensive line, it was always so strange because it seems like every single year the 49ers had like an exceptionally high draft pick, and they just kept taking defensive linemen. And it was like, man, aren't you going to address any other holes? Well, it's really starting to pay off now because that defensive line is something else. I mean, it is out of this world. One of the best I've ever seen. And that defense in general is very, very good. They have a great running game with guys that you hadn't heard of a year ago. Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, is the only massive question mark on this team. I know a lot of people really like Jimmy G, and so do I. I think that he has a lot of upside, but he's a bit too inconsistent for my liking. But the great thing about the 49ers is even when Jimmy G does have one of those bad games, you still have a great shot at winning because your defense is just so good right now. So, yeah, I think the 49ers at 3, I think you could make an argument for even them being the best team in the NFL, but right now 2 or 3 is where I feel comfortable with them. At number 2, I have the Baltimore Ravens, and I know a lot of people are going to want to put them at number 1. I'm not going to jump that far onto the hype train right now. I love Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is one of my favorite players in the NFL right now. He's so exciting to watch. He's revolutionary. They've tailored an offense around him instead of making him adjust to an offense like a lot of quarterbacks are forced to do. He's just so much fun to watch. And I used to be a big Ravens fan back when they were, the Ray Lewis and Peter Boulware and all those guys, Chris McAllister. I love those defenses because I've always been more of a defensive-minded guy, and their defense isn't as good as all that this year, but Lamar Jackson has kind of reinvested me into the Ravens just because it's so interesting what they're doing. They're doing something that's never really been done in the NFL before, and teams haven't been able to figure it out yet. Now, the NFL is notorious for having new systems come into play that work really, really well for a year or two, and then teams start to figure it out, and then you have to make adjustments. And that's probably going to happen here, but given how dynamic Lamar Jackson is, the Ravens really may have found something that has some staying power. It could have some staying power. I really think so, because Lamar Jackson is an extremely unique talent. And then at number 1, I have the New England Patriots. Yes, I get it. I get why people are putting the Patriots at number 3, maybe even number 4. I think that's crazy. I do. I get why, because their offense is decimated right now. They are missing 2 of their starting offensive linemen. They have no playmakers on offense outside of maybe Julian Edelman. Their running game has been basically non-existent largely because of their offensive line. They got Mohamed Sanu as a wide receiver, but is Mohamed Sanu really going to turn that around? But the one guy that they do have is Tom Brady. They have Tom Brady, and they have the best defense in football. That defense is as good as the 49ers defense is. I think that the Patriots defense might be on the same level as that 2000 Ravens defense. Now, I know that they just got gashed by the Ravens a couple weeks ago. I understand that, but that's a pretty unique situation. You have a guy that's running a system that you've never really seen before. You have a guy that is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks that we've ever seen play, that can do so many things so well, that's so athletic. It's very difficult to deal with, even for a Bill Belichick coach defense that has guys like Stephon Gilmore, Devin McCourty, Jamie Collins, Dante Hightower. I mean, that defense is loaded with talent. And I don't penalize them that much for that Ravens loss. I think people are overreacting to it. And I think the Patriots are going to come out. I think they may lose one more, maybe two more games the rest of the year. Their schedule does get much tougher in the second half. So we'll see how it works out. But right now, I still have them at number 1. I still think they're going to win the Super Bowl. Any Bill Belichick coach team, any team that Tom Brady is on, any team with a defense that good, it's hard for me to say that they're anything but number 1. Okay, that is the NFL Power Rankings. Let's move on to some college football. Okay, this is going to be a little bit different. The NFL Power Rankings were my top 10, the 10 teams that I thought were the best. That's the 10 teams that I thought were the best. This is a bit more of a mixture. It's a mixture of which teams I think have the best chance to make it into the college football playoff. It's talent perspective, which teams I actually think are the best, and what I think teams will do moving forward. It's a mixture of all three of those things. And it's also a little bit of rewarding teams that have won big games recently, because there's always recency bias in college football. It's always a thing. It's always going to be a thing. So at number 11, the team that just missed the top 10, I have Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma has an extremely tough path to the college football playoff after their loss to Kansas State and their close victory against Iowa State. I think it's going to be extremely tough for them. Now, they do have a chance to beat some very good teams. They have a chance to beat Baylor maybe twice, which would be crazy, but it's going to be very tough for them to make it to the college football playoff, even if they win out. I don't really see it happening. There are too many teams ahead of them in the pecking order. At number 10, I have Baylor. Baylor, I don't believe, has cracked the top 25, the top 10 in the actual college football playoff. I think that's a mistake. I think that you have to reward what they've done. They're in a Power 5 conference and they're undefeated. They have a chance to go 13-0, and if Baylor goes 13-0, they will make it into the college football playoff. It would be unprecedented for a Power 5 team to go undefeated and to not make it into the playoff. That would be unprecedented. It would be insane. The only way I could possibly see that happening is if LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Minnesota, and Baylor all go undefeated, which is impossible because Minnesota and Ohio State play each other. So it's not going to happen. If we have 4 undefeated Power 5 teams at the end of the year, all 4 of them will be in. Alabama won't get in. Auburn won't get in. But the likelihood of that happening isn't very high because Minnesota is one of those teams and Baylor is the other team. We'll talk about Minnesota in just a minute. Baylor is going to have to beat Texas. They're going to have to beat Oklahoma, and then they're probably going to have to beat Oklahoma again. That's an extremely tall order. I don't see that happening. I love Baylor. I think that they're extremely talented. I think they're fun. And I wish them the best because if they win out, I think that they should be in the playoff, and I think they will be. But I don't see that happening. At number 9, I have Penn State. Penn State just lost to Minnesota, which you could consider a bad loss, but I think that Minnesota team is more talented than people are giving it credit for. I do. So Penn State, I don't think they really have any more of a shot to get into the college football playoff. Maybe an outsider shot, but it would have to be chaos. Chaos would have to incur for them to get in. The path forward is too blurry. It's too clouded right now for me to see a clear path for them to make it in. But I still think that they're very talented. I think they're probably one of the 5 most talented teams in the country. I think that they're up there with teams that are in the SEC just purely from a talent perspective. So I am going to put them at 9. That vaults them into the top 10 just based off that. And the fact that their loss did come against an undefeated team, and they've beaten some other pretty good teams this season. Number 8, I have Utah. This is the Pac-12 portion of this analysis. Pac-12 teams, you are really, really, really wanting Auburn to take care of business at the end of the season. If Auburn can beat Alabama, if Auburn can beat Georgia, that makes Oregon's loss to Auburn look way less bad, and it allows Utah or Oregon to vault into a position to where potentially they could end up in the college football playoff. But the path is still very murky for any team in the Pac-12 as well. That includes Utah. I think they're a solid team. From a talent perspective, it's hard for me to say that they're, top 7, top 8, but I do think that they're solid. They have some good wins. They only have one loss, so I think 8 is about right for them. Maybe you could argue that I could kick them out, move Penn State and Baylor up one, and then put a team like Florida into the top 10 or a team like Oklahoma back into the top 10. That's arguable. I didn't want this list to be too SEC heavy, so that's why. Plus, I'm not that big of a believer in putting a 2-loss team ahead of undefeated teams or ahead of 1-loss teams. Even if they are in the SEC, although from a talent perspective, I think that you could argue that a team like Florida is right up there with the best of them. At number 7, I have Oregon, but I just talked about them in Utah. Number 6, I have Minnesota. I think you got to reward Minnesota for what they did against Penn State. I mean, that was an incredible upset. It shut up all the haters that said that Minnesota, if you look at their early season, it is not pretty. They were getting very close wins against very not good teams. So you have to be very skeptical of what they're doing right now. You do. I'll admit it, but I love them. I really do. The fact that they just beat Penn State, it gives me just a sliver of hope that they can do it. Now, don't fool yourself. A 1-loss Minnesota is not getting into the college football playoff. It's just not. If they win out and then lose to Ohio State, or they beat Iowa, Wisconsin, all this, and lose to Ohio State, yeah, that's an impressive resume. They're not getting into the college football playoff. They're just not. And that's a shame to say, because if any other team were 12-1 with wins over top 10 Penn State, wins against top 25 Iowa, top 15 Wisconsin, and the only loss coming to one of the best teams in the country, Ohio State, they'd probably get in. They'd probably get into the college football playoff. If Alabama had that resume, they'd definitely get in. If Georgia had that resume, they'd definitely get in. Not Minnesota. It's not happening for Minnesota. They have to win out. And if they win out, I could see them going as high as the 2 seed, because think about how impressive that would be for Minnesota to have, I think that would be 4 or 5 top 25 wins, including wins over Penn State and Ohio State when they were ranked in the top 5. That's awfully impressive. Let's see if Minnesota can do it. I have my doubts, but I really want it to happen. Number 5, I have Georgia. That loss to South Carolina is ugly. It's really ugly, but I think it's an aberration. I think that this is one of the... Honestly, you could make an argument that LSU, Alabama, and Georgia are 3 of the 4 best teams in college football. You could make an argument for Ohio State and Clemson being in there too, but Georgia's really good, man. They're really good. I don't know if they're going to make the playoff. They're going to have a lot go right. They're going to have to beat LSU in the championship game. They can't lose another game. But if they win out, they're going to be in. They're going to be in. I think right now that last spot is really coming down to Alabama and Georgia, provided that we don't see any craziness from Baylor or Minnesota. That last spot, at this point, Alabama is really rooting for either Auburn to knock off Georgia. Wait, does Auburn play Georgia? I'm trying to think. I'm getting a little confused in my mind. But for someone to knock off Georgia, because that would make their path a lot clearer. Alabama's likely not going to be in the SEC championship game, so they're going to be heading into it 11-1. Heading into the selection. So they need some help. They need LSU to probably win out because that would mean beating Georgia. So, yeah. Georgia right now, they have a shot, but they're going to have to beat some pretty good teams to get there. Alabama, I'm pretty comfortable penciling in Alabama for 11-1. They still have to get past some pretty good teams, but they're good. They're not losing more than one in a season. But I don't know if that's going to be enough to make it to the college football playoff. Like I said, they're going to need some help. But I have them at number 4. At number 3, I have Clemson. I got a little bit of pushback from one of my viewers about saying that Clemson wasn't the best team in college football. I just can't, man. I can't. Their schedule is not. It's one of the softest schedules I've ever seen for a team that is competing for a national championship. It's brutally soft. And there are some games in there, especially the North Carolina game, where you're going, man, is this team really as good as we think? I mean, a 1-point win versus North Carolina, it's pretty sketchy. So I can't put them above Ohio State. I can't put them above LSU. That doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't as good as those teams. It just means that their resume isn't as good. But from a talent perspective, Clemson still could be the best team in the country, that we're worrying about their schedule for nothing. They're going to win out. They're going to make it into the college football playoff. Clemson, I think, is maybe with the exception of LSU, the safest team right now, just because their schedule is so easy moving forward. I don't see them dropping any more games. You can book it. Guarantee Clemson will be in the college football playoff. Ohio State, I have Ohio State at number 2, and then LSU at number 1. I think that those two are self-explanatory. I think maybe you could make an argument for Ohio State at number 1, but after LSU just beat Alabama, I don't think that argument is very strong. Okay, quickly, I'm going to run through the top 10 power rankings for the NBA. Not going to talk too much about it, but I will talk a little bit. At number 10, I have the Rockets. I just have to see a little bit more from the Houston Rockets before I vault them up. I'm still pretty skeptical of Russell Westbrook and James Harden. At number 9, I have the Toronto Raptors. I love Boucher. I think his defense is a massive X factor for that team. I really like Siakam. I think that team has a lot to like about it, even after losing Kawhi. I have the Heat at number 8. I think Kendrick Nunn is a budding superstar. I mean, he is just, early on in the season, he's cooled off a bit, but early on in the season, he's been something really special to watch. Number 7, I have the Utah Jazz. Do not sleep on the Jazz. Do not sleep on those Midwestern teams, man. Or those, what would you call them? Great Plains, like high desert teams. Do not sleep on them. The mountain teams, maybe. Do not sleep on the Utah Jazz. And do not sleep on the Denver Nuggets. Nikola Jokic is no joke. Jokic is no joke. He is something else, man. He is one of the most unique and talented NBA players I've ever seen. And it's just so much fun to watch him play because he is not athletic. Or he doesn't appear to be athletic, but he's sneaky, man. He's sneaky. Number 5, I have the 76ers. They are the most physically imposing team in the NBA. They're just big. They're just really, really big. And that has its advantages. And if Ben Simmons can ever develop a jump shot, look out. At number 4, I have the Boston Celtics. They have the best record in the NBA right now, but I'm not a massive believer in their long-term viability. Gordon Hayward is out for 6 weeks with an injury, so that kind of hurts. I think that might tail them off a little bit. I do like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They're pretty good, but we'll see where it goes. Not a massive long-term believer in their title chances, but we'll see. Number 3, I have the Bucks. Giannis is great. Chris Middleton is out with an injury for 3 to 4 weeks, but I don't think that'll hurt them too bad. It's early on enough in the season for them to absorb that. Number 2, I have the Lakers. Lakers are great. Can LeBron hold up for a full season in his 17th year? I know they're going to do load management or whatever, but you know, it's a long basketball season. Things happen. And I think that the Lakers are more susceptible to bad things happening to them than most teams who might have a little bit more depth. And I think that's ultimately the separating factor between them and the number 1 team, the Clippers. The Clippers have gone 7-3 without Paul George. They're getting Paul George back. And, yeah, when they get Paul George back, they're going to be the best team in the NBA. I don't even think it's close. I think that they're the clear favorites right now. Go buy a futures ticket, put it on the Clippers, make you some money. that team is just too good. Lou Williams coming off your bench with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and all those cats. It's an insanely good basketball team. So yeah, that is Top 10 Thursday. But before we go, a little bit more Survivor. I talked about this in the first episode, but Survivor is going downhill, and it's going downhill quick. Survivor has gotten woke. And this past episode, it's been the past 3 weeks that Survivor has really started to push this social justice-y messaging, the woke messaging. In week 1, it was the do-rag comment that was construed as racist. In week 2, it was the sexist comment that I talked about last week. And then in week 3, it's sexual harassment. There is a guy on Survivor named Dan. And Dan is an older gentleman, and he is a Hollywood talent agent, which, comes with its own implications after Harvey Weinstein and all that, which is understandable. Dan is a little bit oblivious to personal boundaries. He seems like one of those guys that just doesn't really think, that's kind of flirty. He doesn't really think about personal space that much. He doesn't mind if you touch him, and he touches you even if, and he'll touch you even if he's not picking up on the social cues that you don't want to be touched. It seems like he has trouble reading those social cues, which, why are you playing Survivor in the first place if you have trouble doing that? But I just have to state out front, I understand this past episode, the outrage that the women were showing over this past episode. I understand it more than last week or the week before that. I think that the social justice messaging in this episode was more justified than the past 2 weeks, which I think were ham-handed. I think they were ridiculous. I think they were absurd. They were absurd. This week's is at least somewhat understandable, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. First of all, we're not talking about sexual harassment or sexual assault, as I've seen. We're not talking about rape. We're talking about a guy who gets a little handsy. And it's not even like he's touching their ass or he's touching their tits or he's, like sticking his hand, fucking fingering the shit out of them or anything like that. He's not doing any of that. It's just like he'll touch someone's hair or he'll brush someone's face, or when they're sleeping, he'll put his arm around their waist or something like that and like cuddle. It's probably cold out there. He's probably cuddling to get warm or whatever. And one of the girls was really upset by it, Kelly. And then a few of the other girls were like, yeah, we're kind of upset by it too. But then they kind of backtracked on that. The girls backtracked and said, you know what? No, I'm pretty comfortable with Dan. I don't think Dan, I've always felt safe around Dan. But the one girl, Kelly, who was the one to cry sexist last week, she was upset about it. And I can understand why she was upset about it. She asked him not to do it, and he kept doing it anyway a few weeks later. And that's understandable. It is. But they blew this way out of proportion. If you watch the edit of Survivor, it makes Dan look like a fucking monster. Like he is a monster. If you watch, they have like this scary music playing in the background. Before the show, it was viewer discretion is advised. It was crazy. It's a guy that's getting a little bit too handsy. Just a little bit too handsy. And I think that this is actually morally wrong for Survivor to do something like this. For Jeff Probst, for the editors, for whoever, to paint this portrayal of Dan, because this has real serious consequences. Serious consequences. Dan could lose his job. He could become a social pariah. He has people on Reddit calling him a sexual assaulter. Kelly a sexual assault victim. This is not sexual assault. This is at worst sexual harassment, but it's barely that. If it is, it's barely that. It's just awkward interpersonal mingling and relationships that is a bit uncomfortable for one party, and all the victim would have to do to stop it is to tell Dan forcefully, stop it. Just stop. Dan, I'm not comfortable with this. Seriously, you're starting to creep me out. If you don't stop, I'm going to go to production and I'm going to get them to do something. Granted, Kelly did approach, like I said, Dan, and ask him to stop, but it was in a very polite way and everything. And then Dan did stop for a while, but then he kind of started back. And Kelly, instead of being a strong woman, as South Park would say, she decided to, just kind of cry about it. And the producers came in and they made Dan look like a sexual assaulter. And I'm not trying to blame Kelly. She was wronged in a way. Kelly was wronged. Dan shouldn't have done that. She is a victim, even if I think that it's a crime, a very mild crime. Let's just say that it's a class Z misdemeanor. Let's just say that, because it's a nothing burger. It really is. It's just awkward interpersonal relationships, and they turned it into this whole thing that took a 15-minute tribal council to resolve, and it was crazy. I'm starting to get tired of Survivor, and I never thought I'd say that because I'm a massive, massive Survivor fan. But if they keep pushing this agenda, trying to socially engineer people to believe in this nonsense, that people that I don't know, it's treating people like children. Jamal can't hear the word do-rag because it offends him. Kelly can't hear someone say that there might be an all-women's alliance because it offends them. It'll make them cry. Or we have to step in and call someone a sexual assaulter for being just a tad bit too handsy. Why can't we just let people interact with each other? And why can't we have enough respect for each other to say, stop it when you're making me uncomfortable? Just say, stop it. Just say, Dan, stop it. Because it would have been best for Dan if she would have just said, stop it. Because then Dan would have stopped it, forcefully. If she would have gotten angry at Dan, it would have helped Dan. Because now, instead of him just saying, okay, maybe I need to think about this. Maybe I need to have a little bit more respect for personal boundaries. Instead of him being reflective, he's going to get scared. He's going to get legitimately scared and then possibly get angry and defiant because he's going to have social media mobs coming after him. He's going to be called a rapist, all kinds of crazy shit. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts that I'm trying to organize right now about Survivor, and I'm not doing a great job of it. But I'm just sick of it. I'm just sick. It's crazy how we used to interact with each other 10, 15 years ago and how we have to interact with each other today. It seems so just strict and non-forgiving and brutal and scary. It's fucking scary talking with people now, because if you say something wrong, the consequences are awful. But that's basically, I'm losing my voice. I've been going for an hour now. So I love you guys. Please, like I said, ask me some questions in the comments. I will get to those in the next episode. Please share this with a friend. Please follow me on Twitter at Beanie Antics. Retweet this video when I tweet it out. I love you guys. Top 10 Thursday. Did you guys enjoy it? I liked it. I think it's a good idea. And if you guys liked it, we'll continue doing it. So yeah, I love you guys. I will see you guys later. But until then, peace. Fall Cup on Saturday. Be there.